Chapter 4. 5. Capital F fucking 5 men left. 20 zipped up in bags, and you want me to leave them in the labs? Brandon yelled. Get over it, kid, Jack said, taking a pull from his flask. What, like that? Brandon spat. Yep, if it pleases you. Jack pushed the canteen into the other man's chest. Brandon forced the old man's hand away, which elicited a smile from the old man as he took another pull. Alex sprinted into the hall as the other Crusaders arrived. Not much time, Alex said as he caught his breath. We got choppers inbound. Brandon, can you get the door to the hangar closed? Not on the backup generator, the sniper replied. No heavy weapons here either, boss, Otto added. We don't want a firefight with hovering choppers, Alex stated, looking over at Elias. Why not play the assassin's game? Eli asked. I'm not sure I like the idea of stumbling around in the dark, drunk, Tyler said. You won't have to, Tommy stated. We gotta move the bird or they'll search it, maybe rig it to blow. I'll take the drunk and the big man so they don't get in the way. Get moving then, Alex said. The rest of you find somewhere to hide. Stay in contact. I want numbers as soon as they land. Brandon knew the mess hall would offer the best cover and the best way to funnel in exploring soldiers. Its double doors offered the entrance and exit, so there was no worry about being flanked. And he knew whatever came through that door would have to worry about the 50 caliber rounds bursting outwards at limb-tearing speed. He laid his black steel rifle down on a long table at the back of the mess, but pointed towards the exit. Alex had come up with a plan only a refugee would have thought of. In most situations, Brandon would find himself up a tree, under brush, or covered in furs at the top of his base. But here he was splayed prone across a dinner table that belonged to 20 deceased men. There's a first for everything, I suppose. He hated thinking that. It was too glib for the fallen. He had sworn to protect them, to give them a new life out here, and he had failed. Again. He tried to focus back on Alex's plan. The team was spread too thin throughout the base. Some in teams and others alone. Brandon enjoyed being a sniper, purely for its isolation. He knew there were some that claimed there was a disconnection. Being so far away, it was easy to be detached or emotional about every kill. But he knew better. He could feel every shot connect with its target. He took pride in it. The messier the kill, the more he felt he got his point across. It wasn't always like that. Revenge had made him a jaded man, but that joy he gained from the perfection of every well-placed shot, from every person he felled that never saw it coming, for every round that went through one man and into another. It was all worth the psychosis he had come to bear. He craved it. It kept his head. It was what he needed 10 years ago. Brandon loaded a large clip into the equally large rifle and pulled the hammer back. Anyone have a read on the choppers yet? He asked into the comm. Not yet, Jack replied calmly. The old man was standing above the catwalks to the many darkened hallways curving around the base. He let his jacket go, vying instead for the maneuverability of his vest and sleeveless shirt, a rifle strapped across his back. He was taking a moment for himself, as he often did before an assault, puffing a cigarette, not the cobbled-together butt scraps from back home, and taking soft pulls from his flask. Fucking Christ, how did I devolve into this? He had come all the way back here for the kid. Mikhail was just a rumor, but rumors didn't strike the life from 20 men without making so much as a sound. Legends did that. The old man wasn't sure how much his smoothing over with Brandon had helped. The kid had grown into a man. Coming to see him had brought only pain and death back to the forefront of the sniper's mind. He wondered if he hadn't ruined those 10 years that Brandon needed. Nayala leaving, which the old man hadn't planned on, could only make the situation worse. Jack hoped his old protege would use it as fuel, but that's not how he was. Brandon had developed, just not in the ways the old man had hoped. Jack switched over to a private frequency and gave his comm 2 taps, the old way of asking for a status update. Something you don't want them to hear? Brandon's words crackled into Jack's ear. Nayala must have told you I was coming. You had time to prepare for something like this, the old man replied as he exhaled smoke from the depths of his lungs. Could have kept the door closed too. Almost did. No revenge? No anger at me for leaving you out here? I know why you did it. The only revenge I want is against the man who exposed me for the scared child I was. But to do that, I knew I would have to follow orders and look up to those who I thought had been looking out for me. The last part caught Jack in the chest like a stray round. He knew the sniper had become a better man, but he wanted to pull out the hatred, even if it was directed at him. Jack needed that. He needed to know it wasn't tucked away, ready to come out at an inopportune time, or that it was dead entirely. Never even thought about it? Jack pushed. Not once. Revenge is too easy for the people we care about. Living with the consequences isn't. For a moment, Jack crouched down, arms on his knees. He contemplated whether he had failed or succeeded in his young friend. It scared him that he didn't know the difference. As he regained his composure, he decided that there was a bit of both in separate ways. That brought him no comfort. Thanks, kid. Not sure I would have done the same in your shoes, the old man finally said. You wouldn't have to. And if it had been you, Morrison would have died that night. A beeping went off Jack's main comm. He immediately switched back to the main channel. Captain Newsome, they are here. Jack shuddered, reaching for his rifle. It was Koslov's voice. Mikhail found that convincing the doctor to allow him to leave the lab was simple. A smaller dosage of the same tranquilizer he had received earlier in the back of the venerable man's neck had solved that problem. The Shadow could apologize later for whatever it would mean. He escaped from the medbay and blended in with the shadows of the prison. The database let him know the hell choppers were circling above the base. The crew within them were understandably wary of what lay below. Now, I can't imagine old Dale just let you out, Jack began. He will awaken in a few minutes, Mikhail replied, cutting the other man off. The Shadow hurried his pace towards the hangar. He could detect no nearby vents from which to hide, but instead settled for a storage closet near the entrance of the hangar. He snuck into it, leaving the door cracked. The booms of Hellchopper engines dying down was the only indication he needed of the soldier's arrival. Mikhail shuttered his vision to heat and zoomed in several meters on the choppers themselves. He filtered to show only body heat signatures. There are 16 in total, 8 to each chopper, Mikhail broadcasted. Let them filter out, Alex said. Get a clear shot and take it, Brandon. They'll scatter. Ineffective. It'll rush Lieutenant Duigu, Mikhail countered. Come see for yourself. I'll show you how ineffective it is, Brandon cut in. The sniper left his comm on as a .50 caliber bullet rang out over the channel. The first round smashed into one of the Marine's hips, sending him crashing back into the Hellchopper. The rest of the crew scattered for cover or fired in wild directions, unable to find their assailant. Brandon drew in a deep breath, then exhaled as he gave the trigger another squeeze. The hammer slammed down and ejected another life-ending round, finding its mark in the chest of a Marine who found the sniper all too late. They're wising up, but that's 2 down. Brandon sounded morose. Jack watched as a group of 3 wandered the halls under his catwalk. Morrison's soldiers had become increasingly undisciplined in the years since he and many other veterans had left. No more than raiders with fancy uniforms now. Idiots with guns, rather. It made Jack sick to his stomach to know that they had probably spent most of their time gunning down civilians with more intelligence than they had. That was the sort of shit that made turning on his former employer easy. He didn't need the extra motivation, but it helped reaffirm his reasoning. The great flag he'd once served under had long lost the respect it was due. It was burned and replaced by the banner of money. Soldiers were mercenaries, looking for an uncomplicated way out of hell. But Jack knew men like that lacked resolve. He knew that money could only push a man so far. These men weren't soldiers, they were meat. The 3 seemed indecisive on which way to move. 2 split off in one direction, while the other, who threw his hands up in anger, made for another. Jack followed the solo Marine as he began his sojourn down the hallway. The old man could see the soldier was shaky, nervous. The merc didn't check his corners properly and stood in the middle of 2 doors while swinging his rifle from left to right. If real soldiers had been waiting on either side, the Marine would be long dead. Jack found the man's lack of military tact amusing. It was always soldiers like these who cost units the entire battle. ones who don't buy in. The ones who'd rather go it alone than follow the plan. Jack jumped off the side of the catwalk, landing quietly. He reached for his belt and from it pulled razor wire, a favorite tool he hadn't used often, but now seemed appropriate. The old man moved in the shadows, just steps away from the Marine. Disjointed, inept, a disgrace. Every one of the soldiers sent after him exemplified those traits. As Jack brought the wire over the man's neck, he thought of the men and women he had lost to soldiers such as this one. The waste sickened him, more so because it was at the hands of worthless triggermen. Jack knew there was nothing he could do about that now, but as he watched the sharpened wire force its way through the man's skin, he could feel the petty satisfaction of revenge that came with ending another member of Morrison's bastardized Marine force. The old man throttled down hard. He could hear the Marine gurgle on the blood gushing into his mouth. "It hurts to pick the wrong side, don't it, kid?" he whispered as he pulled the bloody wire away and placed it back in his belt. Jack let the body fall before proceeding up the catwalks in search of his next victim. Mikhail emerged from the closet as soon as 8 of the signatures scurried by. They were focused on what was ahead and clearly disoriented by the lack of light in the hallways. He crept in the dark places, shadowing them from 4 to 5 feet away. They seemed afraid to look back, covering an area once and believing that made them safe. Mikhail reached for the blade at his boot and increased his pace as the group he tailed rounded a corner. The shadow snatched the closest soldier at the rear by the head and drove his blade through the back of the man's skull, twisting it into the brain. While the other troops had moved on, Mikhail brought the body down slowly and laid it on the concrete. He rounded the corner with his bloodied blade. The Marines were so hurried they hadn't stopped to check on their fallen comrade. Mikhail took advantage of another who had broken off to explore a side room. The shadow brought the heavy end of the knife hard down on the Marine's skull, sending him to the ground. Mikhail dropped with him, sinking the blade into his spinal cord. He shuttered his vision to watch the heated life chill away from the foe. The other signatures were rushing into a crossfire Alex had devised. Mikhail watched as small, quick heat signatures sped by or into the Marines. 2 more fell as the rest fired confused in every direction. Then the shooting stopped. Mikhail could see Alex and his group moving positions on the catwalk, chasing down the escaping soldiers. "How many are left, Koslov?" Alex yelled as he slammed another clip into his rifle. 9. Your 4 are making for the escape. The other 5 are spread throughout. Take care of them. We can handle this group. By your orders. Alex shook his head at that response. He didn't understand Mikhail's nature, but right now he needed the man's cold utility. Layla and Janet were already in their next positions, raining hell down on the Marines who could only eyeball their targets out in the open. Alex picked one who stood at the dead center of the room, hidden behind nothing, and took blind aim at the catwalk where no one stood. Alex leaned on the railing and took a short breath, exhaling as he pulled the trigger. 2 rounds fired off in quick succession and penetrated the man's head and chest, dropping him to the floor. Janet clipped another, with smart shots of her own, while Layla drew his attention. "Grenade!" Layla yelled out as Alex spotted the cylinder projecting towards him. He tried to roll out of the way, but the explosion hit first. "C2 trying to rush the choppers," Brandon said lightly into his comm. The response was the Hellchopper engines firing up and the soldiers running for the rear hatches. The sniper let instinct take over and fired a shot into the closest chopper's canopy. Glass shattered, and the parts that didn't were sprayed with blood. Brandon swung his rifle around and fired off a shot into the other canopy, but the bird was already in the air, rising unevenly. The sniper knew he must have hit his mark. The chopper refused to gain more altitude and smashed against the hangar siding before crashing back to the flooring. The smell of jet fuel seeping into the hangar floor gave Brandon an idea. He stood from the table, leaving his rifle behind, and reached into one of the pockets of his jacket. He glanced over at the stationary chopper, at the pilot's blood that coated the interior of the cockpit. Brandon strode over to the wrecked chopper, cigar in mouth and old-world lighter in hand. He saw the bodies of soldiers that had been launched out of the bird by the crash. One wasn't moving. Another was flailing with broken bones in the ever-growing puddle of fuel. For a moment, Brandon laughed. It was funny to him. Funny to see someone other than the people he cared about dead or dying. As he lit a cigar and tossed the lighter into the fast-burning petrol, he decided that he would have to experience that more often. Mikhail stood over two bodies, both with bullet wounds scattered across their chests. He hadn't done this, but assumed the doctor had finally awoken from his forced coma, and likely terribly angry. As he looked about, he could find no trace of the remaining 3 soldiers or their corpses. "Boss was right not to trust you." The deep female voice came from behind him. "Turn around slowly," she continued. Mikhail did as she asked, then shifted his vision to normal. He noted the slight fear she showed when he did that. A part of them, though deeply repressed in his mind, enjoyed that. "Riegel, Fabienne, commander with Morrison's Marines, commended for service against street gangs, raiders, and leading a failed assault," Mikhail stated. "Spout what you want, assassin. I still have the gun," she spat back. Mikhail took in her features. She was clothed in digital patterned black and gray fatigues, the 2 Marines at her sides in similar gear. The shadow shuttered his vision back to heat. There was a movement behind the Marines. His earlier assumption about the doctor had been correct. "That's a neat trick. Shame it's not as frightening as you think it is." Riegel sneered as she lifted her pistol up at the shadow's head. "Let's see you hide from this." 2 bullets rang out and dropped the Marine standing at Fabian's flank. "Are you sure?" Mikhail asked, looking past her and at Dellen. "Next time just ask to be discharged," the doctor said, rubbing his neck with one arm, a pistol raised in the other. "I judged you to be obstinate," Mikhail replied. Dellen shook his head. "Maybe we could talk about this later. Now, Miss Riegel, are you going to put that shooter down, or do I have to put a bullet in you too?" Dellen inched towards her. Mikhail watched as she laid the pistol down by her feet, and again changed his vision. This time he watched her heart rate. It was elevated, and the bones in her hands were clenched. She wasn't surrendering. Riegel threw a swift roundhouse kick, knocking the pistol from Dellen's hands. The doctor was still groggy from the anesthetic. Fabian threw another kick into his chest that dropped Dellen to the ground. Mikhail had already begun his sprint towards her, but she countered with another roundhouse. Mikhail threw up his wrists and deflected the attack. Riegel threw another leg, but this time Mikhail caught it. As he went to drop an elbow to shatter her knee, the agile woman jumped with her other leg and used it to uppercut the shadow with her other knee. Mikhail let loose of her other leg and used the momentum from the blow to roll back. As he did, he grabbed the pistol that had sat under his feet. Fabian regained her balance while Mikhail was forcing himself up. She rushed him, attempting to throw another high kick. He took in the sight of her eyes going wide as she saw her own pistol hip. The shadow fired and sidestepped, watching her body fall hard to the ground. Mikhail knelt beside her, checking her pulse. She was still alive, but the bullet had gone right through her stomach. I can't feel my legs," she said, just above a whisper. Why did you?" "Superiority. You were elegant," Mikhail deadpanned as he put 2 fingers into the cavity of her stomach. Fabian coughed up blood before she spoke again. "You could have just killed me." "Nothing is learned through death, only pain," he replied, wiping his 2 fingers on her forehead. The shadow rose above her body. A bullet rang out, smashing Fabian's skull. "I disagree." Mikhail looked towards Dellen, but he was still out. It was Brandon who appeared in the doorway, smoking rifle in hand. "Ugh, what the fuck happened?" Alex said to himself, exhaling into the dirty metal floor. His head felt like a melon splitting down the middle, and his eyes were having trouble adjusting to the light. "Layla?" he called out, rising to his feet quickly, lightheaded as he was. He could smell thick smoke in the air as he gained his bearings. Layla was on the ground just a few feet away and Janet beside her, stirring from unconsciousness. "Fucking flashbangs," Janet groaned as she slapped the floor. "God damn it." Alex helped Janet up, then reached for Layla as she started to come out of it. Anyone else alive? Alex asked into the comm while pulling one of Layla's arms over his shoulder. Still here, kid. Jack's voice came in. Looks like we got another problem, though. Did you guys see any... Elias's voice slowed as he saw Brandon's rifle and Mikhail's pistol locked onto each other. Alex, Janet, Layla, and Jack came into the room soon after. Get any? Elias asked. 3. You? Alex replied. None. These guys wanted them out of the way so they could kill each other. The threats have been dealt with. Now it's time for justice for my men. My fate will not be decided by jaded moral principles, Lieutenant Duigo, Mikhail responded. He's right, kid. You just told me off about revenge, but now you want it? Jack spoke up. No, this has nothing to do with revenge. This is justice, just like Morrison. I don't buy it, Brandon. I didn't come all the way out here to a frozen fucking wasteland just to have the only 2 guys I was looking for kill each other. You got problems? Fine. But Morrison'll die first. After that, it's your business, Alex yelled. Brandon gave the younger man a hard stare. For a moment, Alex thought the sniper might shoot him instead. Mikhail remained motionless, his arm like a statue holding his pistol, deadlocked on Brandon's brain. We don't even know what he is, Brandon pleaded. And neither does he. Trying to kill him doesn't help us, Alex replied. Brandon turned his head back at Mikhail, his face red with anger. Finally, after a few more tense moments, he exhaled and slung his rifle across his back. Mikhail responded by lowering his pistol and shuttering his vision. Brandon drew a few steps closer to Mikhail. The shadow, unintimidated, did not step back. The sniper put his face in front of Mikhail's. I don't give a fuck what you are, but I know those eyes won't see where my bullet is coming from when this is all over. To live in this place, my home, for so long, and learn nothing of pain is a failure, Lieutenant. Mikhail never stopped his blank stare at the sniper. Brandon shook his head and turned back to Alex. He looked drained. What now, then? We pack anything valuable and leave, Alex stated. Morrison will send more troops eventually. The old man knows where we're off to next. I want everyone to fix up, then take what Brandon says to take. We're out in 2 hours. Lifting crates was an uncomplicated way of escaping conversation with the rest of the team. Alex couldn't remember the last time he slept, but he kept putting one foot in front of the other. After his outburst that somehow talked 2 armed men down from killing each other, he wasn't in the talking mood. He just wanted time to think and then sleep. It killed him to think of the soldiers Brandon lost. Well, he'd only come out here for 2 men. The sniper squad would have been a boost against Morrison. Yeah, not having them here to die for my purpose is what's sad. Not caring that they were dead men made him feel more like Jack. But could he really allow himself to be morally concerned? He was fighting a war. The stark realization of death being a possibility was changing his reality as every day more people around him died. Every day and every new place they went raised the risks. Those risks and their price made Alex wonder if he would be able to order the growingly drastic steps needed to take down Morrison. He was already busy marking down plans for their end run in his journal, but he needed more supplies than the miracles Jack dug up. Stress piled on his shoulders, 1 pound at a time. 1 foot after the other. Explosives, better fatigues, newer weapons that didn't jam after every reload, distractions, exits, and escapes. That last part was becoming more optional all the time when he weighed the mission's low chances of success. He knew that the last step was for everyone else. Alex had no intention of leaving Morrison's tower until he saw the man's corpse. And by that time, he figured there would be no escape. That decision would be what Layla and Elias wouldn't want to hear, which was why he terrorized himself with the guilt of it when he was alone. The thought of all these other lives resting on his every word scared the shit out of him. It was a rush leading them into combat, into victory, but it did nothing to ease the pain of losing Remy or Van. Alex wanted to make sure that if he couldn't get out, at least the others could, if they made it that far. For now, it was all just hypothetical. He didn't even have a map to work with, but that would change when they returned. For the moment, he knew he had to focus on what came next. China, Jack's next stop on his recruitment list. He had to assume his team was as weary as he was from the extended travel. He'd make the old man buy the first round at Alonso's when they got home. Alexander. Alex nearly dropped the crate he was carrying out of surprise. I am sorry. I did not mean to cause fear, the shadow said. It's fine. I was a little involved in my thoughts. Do you need something, Mikhail? Alex asked. I had an answer for you regarding your request for cooperation. I wish to join your team. Why so quick to change your mind now? I have no more interest in remaining here. I have access to my old records and data. Staying in this graveyard will not expedite its processing. Alex set down his crate and raised an eyebrow at the shadow. Tommy said the damage on that other chopper was simple enough to fix, even with the fire. But you're choosing to ride with us? Partly. My records suggest that I had never left what is considered Russian territory. The maps in my head could be considered dated, but also useful to you and your team. So you want to come with us to figure yourself out? It is a suitable arrangement. I also do not believe my employer will welcome me back, and it is clear John Morrison will target me as well. Is that deal sufficient? I've got no problem with that. Welcome to the team, Mikhail. Alex extended his hand, but it took the shadow a moment before he extended his own. What, did you have to look that up? Alex joked. Yes. As I said, I have no memory of my past life. This includes basic social interaction, none of which the engineers believed I would have any use for. The response made Alex feel guilty for making a joke at his expense, but still curious about the assassin's condition. What do you feel? Alex asked. That is not an easy question to answer. I can recognize some emotion, amusement, pleasure, pain, humor. However, I do not have a response to them as you would. I simply acknowledge them for what they are. Others, such as fear, hopelessness, sadness, were conditioned away. The database may tell me how I should feel if engaged with those feelings, if only for the sake of espionage. But I have no reaction, Mikhail explained. So even if you got your mind back, it wouldn't be the same, Alex pressed. I am uncertain. In the files I found on the computer, it states that the database overwrote the memory center of my brain. If I were to regain those memories, should it be possible, I would not be as I am now, or perhaps was before. I believe my experiences now would change me once again. The only way to be certain would be to reintegrate them into my mind. Is that possible? Unknown. It would have required a great deal of effort on the part of the scientists here to devise a procedure, and to back up my memories. Once I have processed the rest of the data, I will know more. I've got to imagine you were looking for other answers here too. Did you get them? Alex caught Mikhail's eye shudder quickly. Nothing relevant. Secrets of a powerful entity that broke upon itself long before you were old enough to understand. The younger man decided that now would be a suitable time to back off. He didn't need Mikhail changing his mind at the last minute. As long as you're fighting for us, that's all I care about. A long time, mate. Still getting into some fine messes, aren't we? Dellen said as he pulled up a chair in the mess near Brandon. You mean Jack putting us in them, Brandon shot back. Yeah, well, who else then? To be truthful, I thought you'd be more resistant than me. None of you would have made it in if I had known what was going to happen to my men, Brandon said, shaking his head. Well, Mikhail would have killed all of you. Count yourself a lucky Canuck, huh? Brandon sighed. His mind was filled with grief. First, Nyala left him after so many years of wanting, then finally having her. And then Jack shows up like the Reaper at his doorstep. That he was at least able to move past, even past the nightmare Jack had put him through. But losing the men under his command. How long until we leave this metal graveyard? Brandon asked. Guess why I'm here. Got everything packed. Everything but the rifle. Brandon jutted a thumb towards his back. Well, come on then. Rest of the team's already on board. The sniper rose from his seat and followed Dellen towards the hangar. The turned-over hell chopper was still burning, despite the flakes of snow that fell on the metal floor. 10 years ago, when he found this place, he'd made it a point to keep the hangar dry. Eventually, the responsibility had fallen to his men. It was an exercise in attention to detail, and for years his troops kept it as dry as the desert. Now that was all gone, and he counted it among the first of many memories he would miss of this place. Alex was standing at the end of the ramp with Elias, waiting for the last two members to come aboard. Dylan hurried up and in while muttering something to Alex. "Been a long time since I rode first class," Brandon mocked. Alex gave him an arm up, and the trio made for the center of the hold. "What'd you say your name was?" Brandon asked. "Elias. Glad to have you here." "Jack, what's the next move?" Alex asked as the hell chopper rumbled to life below their feet. "Tommy has a course laid out for Beijing. The Chinese will allow 3 of us to come down and pick Miss Shazari up." "Shit, you'd think after all these years they wouldn't be so bent about letting one of their own go," Tommy commented over the loudspeakers. "She's Japanese, you dipshit," Elias yelled towards the cockpit. "Why are we going through the Chinese government to get her then?" Layla asked. "It sounds strange, I know, but there are a lot of places that look like back home. Russia might have been stiff cloudbreaker, but Beijing, well, you'll see it for yourself soon," Jack said. "Then you'll forgive me for not calling sooner then," John Morrison said to the screen in front of him. "That depends on what you need from me, John. You always call when you need something, but I'm not your father," came the voice over the speakers. Morrison grew red in the face. He was not used to being talked down to, but he fought his anger before speaking again. "That's not entirely true. Soldiers still stand guard at your walls, don't they?" Morrison tried to keep his voice even. "Your contributions towards my country have been noted. Now what do you want?" the voice replied, agitated. "I need an assassin or a bounty hunter. One capable of handling a well-trained squad, but without backup." "I don't keep any here. Always at arm's reach, John. That way they don't get any ideas or better offers when they're lounging outside your office." "Then give me a recommendation." The voice took a moment to reply. "Do you even know where these renegades are, John?" "I have been tracking them, yes," Morrison replied, "but my commander in Russia hasn't reported in. I fear the worst." Again, the voice was silent, but this time for an extended period before posing another question. "How long have they been out of country?" "Nearly a month, and the reports say they picked up more recruits," Morrison answered. "You stopped a threat like this 10 years ago. You don't need my recommendation," the voice replied. "Not well enough. One of my sources believes that they are being led, or at least advised, by the same man who planned the first attack. I've yet to be able to confirm this." "Who is he?" "A former member of my private army, though he's kept his tracks well hidden. I thought the fool died during the attempt on my life." "Surprising that you were able to keep that secret from me. Secrets are my business now," the voice scorned. "I didn't hide it, they failed. Maybe you just failed to dig deep enough." "Watch your tone, John. Do not presume to speak to me as if you're my petulant son. I have a recommendation, though I have little need for his services anymore. He has never failed me. Very visceral, very effective." "Send me his file." "First, you'll withdraw men from Moscow. Word spread back to Jerusalem. You're making the ambassadors nervous. Nervous ambassadors mean nervous leaders, which make my job more difficult." John fought to keep himself from boiling over. Never had he faced a threat so dire, so seemingly widespread. His thoughts went back to his son, reduced to a shattered husk in front of his own eyes. "They have reason to be nervous if this group is allowed to run free. We need to have them labeled as terrorists. That will justify my actions in the recent weeks," Morrison explained. "I keep you nearby for one reason, John. Your power and your manipulations keep us both ahead in the council. It knows out the moderates in Sydney, the wretches in Russia, and the upstarts in Beijing and Jerusalem. Your military keeps everyone in check and supplies you with what you've lacked since your father died: technology.
Now you and I both know there would have to be a majority vote among the council to grant your request. We have 2, 3 if you make more false promises to Russia.
You don't believe Bernard will surrender a vote? Morrison asked.
Bernard has far larger problems than these bandits. Overpopulation is starting to become a real issue in the Middle East.
The Australians will abstain if they can't see a way this affects them. All that leaves is the Chinese.
They are an unknown variable. We may have shared too much with them too soon. Yet I have a few favors I can call in. With luck, they will still remember that we own them,
the voice explained. You do that then. In the meantime, send over that file. If this bounty hunter is as good as you say, then perhaps we won't need them flagged.
You may find him more impressive than your men.